we've had a load of snow. Red alert over where I am, we've had a couple of feet of snow actually. And as far as I'm aware, I think most of Europe has had this snow. So yeah, it's not been good. Second thing is I've got the man flu. I've had it for a while actually now and I feel crap. So I've had cabin fever because I've not been out. I couldn't get out even if I wanted to. Yeah, so there's no fishing happening at the moment for me. So firstly, we're gonna have a look at a little bit of my B-roll that I've filmed over the last couple of days. It's snow time. Yeah, as I said, it's been pretty jiggy here with the old snow, but there's been an awful lot of traffic on Facebook. When people can't get out and fish, what do? We all sit around and we talk about it, and that's all well and good, but sometimes the advice that you see being dished out, you kind of go, all right, yeah, I wouldn't have said that, but hey, first and foremost, there is no wrong or right in carping. I mean, we all have our ideas of how fish react in certain conditions, and we all think we know what we know, but most of the time the carp undo all of what we know and do the exact opposite. So sometimes, you know, don't follow the rule book. There's been a couple of questions. A lot of guys are itching to get out and they've been all online asking, how do I tackle this particular water? And to a man, everyone said, go to the deepest part of the lake. That's where the fish are going to all hang out. Deeper water, that's where the fish will go in these cold conditions. Second thing is they've said, well, do I put a bit of bait out? And everyone to a man has said, yeah, I put a little bit of particle out, sweet corn and a few bits of hemp and groats and whatever. And I'd put a light scattering of boilies on the zone and I'd fish my hook baits on top of it. So the first port of call is, let's differentiate. We're not winter fishing here now. Winter fishing is December, January, February. It's only just begun to be March, but in March we tend to get the worst of our weather, the coldest spells, and we also tend to get the most snow precipitation than we do in January and February put together. It's just the way it goes. The only saving grace is we get a lot more light hours, and the light hours are a great thing for us. The more light, the more fish are becoming active. There is a need for carp to become active in March and April because they're going to have to build themselves up ready for spawning. So we do get fish fighting the urge to be dormant, and they will sort of hunt out a little bit more food than they have been eating over the December, January and February period. Now in December, January and February I would fish completely different to how I would fish very early March into April. Carp are a cold-blooded creature, therefore their metabolism is ruled by their body temperature, and their body temperature is a reflection of the water temperature. So the colder the water temperature, the less they're going to want to feed, but that doesn't mean they won't feed. They will just have much shorter windows of feeding. So let's deal with where on the lake you should be aiming for to maybe catch one of these very early spring carp. Deeper water for me is a no-no. I tend to avoid it like the plague. I always head for the most shallow water I can find, usually in the 2 to 3 foot bracket, and somewhere that is receiving the most amount of sunshine over the daylight hours. For me, that's the most productive area, because the carp, being a cold-blooded creature, as I've already stated, will actually come into the shallow waters where the sunlight has warmed it up. The warming up of the shallow water happens quicker than it does obviously of the deep water, and that's where most natural life is going to start becoming a little bit more active. There's a general heating of the shallows quicker than the deeper parts of the lake, and therefore the carp will utilize this for their own metabolism. They go in, and even if there's a slight incremental difference in temperature, it will trigger them to start feeding. Now there's something that one of our good friends on Facebook, Keith Moores, well-known carp angler, been around donkey's years like myself, and owns his own fishery down in France. Keith is taking daily temperature readings of his lake, and he's out on his lake every day. He observes the carp. On Facebook the other day, he actually made a statement which I found really, really interesting, because it just totally backs up my own thinking of late winter, early spring carping. He mentioned that it was really noticeable that if there was any water temperature rise, irregardless of how cold the water temperature was, if there was any incremental rise, the carp would start feeding, and vigorously. If there was any incremental decrease in water temperature, it would switch the carp off completely. And it was irrelevant of how cold the water was or how warm. So even if the water was 18 degrees, if it went to 19 degrees, it actually triggered the carp to feed heavier. If it was 18 degrees and went down to 17 degrees, conversely, it would actually knock the feeding off or severely hamper the feeding. Also, he said that he could see that a lot of his lake was covered in ice, and yet in the 2-foot water, he was watching massive big carp rooting up the bottom. He didn't expect the carp to be down there, but again, it was where the sunlight was shining the most. It was the shallowest water on the lake, and the carp felt really comfortable coming into that area to feed. So for me, I arrive on a lake, I'm looking for the bank that's going to receive the most sunshine in that day, and on that bank I'm going to look for the shallowest part of that lake. There's also another thing to look for. If you have any prior knowledge to the lake and you know that in summer there are weed beds or lily beds, especially lily bed, I would be fishing as close to those known lily beds as I could get away with safely, because they also retain heat. They're naturally warmer in winter than the surrounding temperatures, and carp like to rest up in those ex-lily pads or ex-weed beds. So it's another area to be putting baits close to. So now to how much bait should I put in? Well, this is where I differ from everyone. I wouldn't be putting any bait in at all. If I'm going this time of year, I tend not to fish overnighters because I'm just too old. The cold gets to me, I can't do it. When fishing becomes an endurance test, I'm out. I want to enjoy my fishing. So for me, I'd only really be doing day sessions. So I'd be arriving an hour before dawn and an hour after dusk. That's the type of time frame I'd be fishing. So I've already found out that I know I want to be on the bank that's got the most light. Now I want to know how much feed I'm going to put in, and for me it's zero. I'm going to be waiting for the fish to dictate to me how much they're actually grabbing about. Visually, I want to be seeing signs of them feeding before I'd introduce any amounts. I'm looking for these fish that are coming into the shallow water who are opportunistic feeders and see my visual pop up in their face, over-flavoured, bright and begging to be eaten. That's what I'm doing. I want them to see something that is going to actually go, ooh, bit of food, I'm going to have that. Carp this time of year, especially, you know, they're not moving as much as we would like them to be. They're going to be opportunistic feeders. They're going to take what's in front of them. And if we can place a well visible pop-up that's really over-flavoured and pumping out attractors, you're going to get a pickup quicker. And for me, that's the way I'd go. Now, so the route I would go, I'd fish my 3 rods, and each one would have a different style pop-up. So I'm going to go through the range of what I'm using here. Obviously with Nutribaits, white spice, white in colour, absolutely one of the best winter and spring flavours you'll ever come across. White spice has such a track record of catching fish and a lot of big fish. Again, with the bait soak spray, I'd be spraying the individual bait. You can spray them into the tub, or you can spray them individually on the hook bait just before you cast out. To be honest with you, I tend to spray them individually before I cast out. I just find it, you know, I'm casting every 2 hours anyway because I'm searching the swim, looking for fish. Some of the best known winter flavours ever created were the Mega Spice, Ultra Spice by Rod Hutchison, but Techni Spice was always in that bracket, the 3 amigos. Anybody who knows anything about, you know, track records of flavours, Mega Spice, Ultra Spice, Techni Spice, they're the mainstay of most winter anglers. And again, the bait soak spray just amplifying the hook bait. These bait soak sprays have the right amount of flavour that will not overcook the actual hook bait. They are full of enhancers and other liquids that really help the water solubility and the amplification of the bait. So that's my first rod, my second rod, my third rod. I'll be going for the new kid on the block. These are the new Winterberry Pop Ups and the Winterberry bait soak spray. Fruit flavours really start to kick off early spring, and I have to tell you, in field testing, this particular bait has been catching a serious amount of carp. everywhere. Based on an old school recipe, very novel in the way it comes with whites and purples. Purple, another interesting colour, very underused. If I was to pick any particular colour, for me, white stands out. White for me on pop-ups is my go-to colour. If I can use a white pop-up, I'll use it every single time. That's not to say that the other colours will not catch on any given day. They will. It's just my own preference. And this is coming to a thing of confidence. If you're confident in something, I know that that's not going to be my problem. If I cast these out, I know the carp, if they're feeding, will have one of these. I have to park that. I don't have to worry about it. My rigs, I know are going to fish the bait in a manner that I'm going to be happy. It's going to present it in a way I'm going to be happy with, whether it's a stiff hinge or whether it's a runny rig. I know that it's going to present my pop-up in the right manner. So I don't have to worry about that. Now I have to just worry about location. Locating the carp is going to be the hardest bit. In winter, as I said, my preference is to go to the shallowest part of the lake with the sunshine, but there are other times I will change that up. If you see a fish head and shoulder anywhere on the lake, I'll be putting all 3 hook baits smack where I could get nearest to that fish that was showing. Reason being, this time of year, the carp, if they do show, it's not because they're feeding, it's usually because they've been laying up a little bit more dormant over the winter months, and now they're looking to rid themselves of lice and leeches, and they're going to come clean out of the water as they shake off all of these parasites. If you see a fish show, you need to put all your rods on that, because guaranteed, if one shows, there's probably another 20 or 30 of fish underneath it. That's how they're a pack fish, they're a shoal fish, and carp will congregate, especially in the colder months. So if you've seen a show, you need to put all your eggs in one basket. The other thing is zigs. So if you're fishing a water that's slightly deeper and you have, maybe 10 to 15 feet of water, I'd definitely start thinking about maybe zig fishing. Zig fishing, this time of year is another standout method. The carp can tend to be sitting mid-water where they're most comfortable. So again, if you know that you've got 15 foot of water out there, if you can get to maybe say 7.5 feet of water as a starting point and fish maybe a foot either side of that on a zig, and again using a bait soak spray to enhance it, just to make a signal that a fish is sitting there and it is fairly dormant in the water. A signal like that could actually make it just start to move and look for a bit of food. And if you've got a nice visible zig or a pop-up suspended 7.5 feet off the deck, you may be in with a chance of catching. So they're my kind of 2 things. Zigs will catch you fish this time of year, and pop-ups fished in shallow water will certainly be my starting point. That's where I'll go every single time. We all have a tendency to sit out of the bad weather. Most anglers, if they've got access to it, they'll sit under their umbrella in a bivvy or in their car or van. If you can afford to, stay out and watch the water. Try and observe where the fish are showing, if they are. Try and observe the shallows and see if there's any plumes coming up of silt or any shows of a tail slapping the water as they're feeding. It's all those little things that are going to make the difference to your winter fishing, or your spring fishing, should I say. So, this has been 2 minutes. I've given up worrying about whether we hit the 2-minute mark or not. I know this video ain't 2 minutes long. These subjects are too broad to condense down for 2 minutes. I can't guarantee these are going to be every Tuesday. We may run out of content. I may get fed up talking, which anybody who knows me knows is highly unlikely. But as I said, we may not be here every Tuesday, but keep an eye out for when we are, because there's some real gems coming down the line. So this is Gerry, 2 Minute Tuesday, another one in the bag. Done. See you soon.